democracy and ever-changing views and computer terminology. Commodore's news. Are you keeping up with the Commodore? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you. Are you keeping up with the Commodore? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you. Are you keeping up? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you. Are you keeping up? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you.
Hi, I'm Graham and welcome to the Commodore Cave. Today is part 3 of this series. I'm going to walk you through the Amiga computers that are here in the cave. If you haven't seen the 2 previous sections, I suggest you check out the links below. And this is where the story begins. On the 23rd of July 1985, at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, the world was introduced to
I'd like to bring up one more animation now. This one, Robo City. There's quite a lot going on in this image. If you look at the right times, you'll see animation on top of animation on top of animation with correct saving and restoring of the background. You see multitasking going on here. The fire hydrant and the dog that don't like each other are separate tasks doing a proximity check.
And it's so lifelike. Of course, no self-respecting 1000 owner wouldn't flip the lid over and have a look at the signatures that are inscribed in the bottom of the case. And while I've got the case open, we'll flip the floppy drive out of the way, and you can see this is a PAL machine. It's got a single motherboard. This here is the RAM expansion. Otherwise, it's as it came from the factory. It came with this handy garage that the keyboard could slide out of the way into, an 880K floppy disk drive, and under here was the essential 256K RAM expansion to give it a massive 5112 kilobytes. On the right hand side we have the mouse and joystick ports and the expansion port, and around to the rear we have the usual ports with a couple of options for connecting it to video. That's the fan. On this side we simply have the on-off button. I'll switch it on, and this should be very familiar to the original Amiga owners. The chirp. On the first Amigas, part of the operating system was encoded on floppy disks.
Hi from the Commodore Cave.
These demos are all running in BASIC. There's 4 screens all running animation simultaneously, and is a great multitasker even though it's not married. Now you don't see this very often today. The Amiga 1000, and alongside we have the 1060 sidecar. This is a complete IBM computer running at 4.77 megahertz, and it shares resources with the Amiga side. There's not much to see on the sidecar. That's the back of it. There's provision there for slots, as you can see, and the power supply runs into the Amiga. It attaches to the expansion port in the Amiga through the large connector here, and the ports for the mouse are passed through here to the front. There is a hard drive installed in here. It's shared between the Amiga and the IBM side, but it won't boot off hard drive. We still need a floppy disk for that. Many of you will probably recognise this program, X-Tree Pro. Microsoft Works, the predecessor to MS Office. Handy little program that I use many times. And it's not just the applications, we can also run the old DOS games. There we go. And of course, sitting behind all this, we still have our Amiga running. So we can use both computers simultaneously. Now that's what you call multitasking. In 1987, Amiga released the next model, the Amiga 500. This computer came in with twice the memory of the 1000, yet it came at half the price. It was also the first Amiga to come in with the well-known wedge shape that we're so used to seeing, and it became the most popular selling Amiga of all time, selling about 4 million of them. Marketing really took off, and it came in a number of different boxes, and many of them were very beautifully designed to catch the eye. And don't they just? This is the first major revision after the Amiga 1000. This retained the same CPU as its predecessor. It came with a 1.2 kickstart, which was built in, and that was later upgraded to version 1.3. We'll take a look around it. We've got our keyboard and our numeric keyboard on this side with our LEDs, the chicken head over here, and we'll take it for a quick spin. Around the back, we have our ports. On this side, with the built-in floppy disk drive. Underneath, we have our air vents, and over here we have an expansion port for such things as additional hard drives. Over here we have an expansion port, and most of the time these computers came with an extra 512k RAM, bringing it up to 1 megabyte. Then we have this beast of a machine, the Amiga 2000. Just listen to that humming. This was targeted for the business market because it was so expandable, but inside it was basically an Amiga 500. It came in an assortment of configurations. This one has 2 floppy disk drives and also a 5 1/4. We'll take the lid off and have a peek inside. Commodore, in order to compete with IBM, included expandability in this computer. There were slots galore. In this one we have an IBM bridge board. There is a VGA card to support it. We've got a hard drive, a 68030 process accelerator, and extra memory. And here is a look at the back of it. On the 7th of May 1990, the world met the very elegant Amiga 3000. And this was a major improvement on previous models. It was the first one to come out with a 68030 processor, Kickstart 2 and Workbench 2, and it was also expandable, although the slimline case, in keeping with workstations of the day, made it rather difficult. This computer ran at 16 MHz and had 1 meg of chip RAM available. It had provision for 2 floppy drives, though most came out with 1. This panel here could be removed for a second one to be placed into it. We have our LEDs at the front for power and hard disk drive access. Around on this side we have keyboard, joystick and mouse ports. And this is the rear of the computer. It's 1991 and Commodore released 2 brand new models. This one here, the CDTV, which stands for the Commodore Dynamic Total Vision. As you can see, it looks nothing like a computer, which is exactly what Commodore intended. They wanted to build a unit that would fit in well with the stereo system. Inside here, we basically have an Amiga 500 with 1 megabyte of chip RAM. On boot up, you get a nice animated welcome screen. We then put our CD into our CD caddy. That basically becomes a big floppy and goes into our drive. There were a number of titles that were made for the CDTV, and this is one of them. The unit definitely looks like a hi-fi component. Over here we have our power button, our headphone jack, that's our CD caddy, there's the eject button, our display, play and pause, and up and down. Over here we can go CD to TV or reset if we need to. We'll take a look around it. Just some vents on the top and the side. The only other areas of interest are on the back. This is our fan input. We've got our remote keyboard and mouse, our power in. It comes with MIDI, so we've got MIDI out and MIDI in. The disk drive, serial port, parallel port, RGB video out. We've also got S video out on this and composite, channel select and RF out. And they also included infrared remote control, which is powered by a couple of AA batteries. There were specifically some CDs that came out with this machine with extra audio and extra video. The full-blown keyboard came later, as did the matching floppy drive. There's also a accompanying mouse, same colour, which unfortunately I don't have. This is the Amiga 500. This is the Amiga 500 Plus. The cases are virtually identical. The difference here is we now have a chicken head embossed up here, and we've also got Commodore branded and A500 model underneath it. A quick walk around, there's an expansion port on this side. On the back are our ports. And over this side we have a built-in floppy disk drive. And similar to the other computers, air vents and an expansion port here. It boasted the all-new ECS chipset and Kickstart version 2.0. 1992 saw the release of 3 new Amigas. The first was the A600, although this was originally going to be called the A300 and introduced as a cost-reduced model. In order to convince the skeptical public to part with their hard-earned cash, they introduced for the first time the PCM CIA slot over here so that you could actually use RAM cards in it. And inside they had the IDE interface, so this could now support hard drive. The A600 has got the embossed chicken head over here with the Commodore brand alongside. It also has the LEDs for power, floppy and disk on the front now, which weren't there before. Around the back we have our different ports. On this side we've got a built-in floppy disk drive, double density, and we've got our mouse and joystick ports down here. And over here we have provision for memory or card expansion. This one has an accelerator in it. It came standard with 1 megabyte of memory but could easily be upgraded to 2 megabytes, and it also sported the new Kickstart version 2. Commodore intended this to replace the Amiga 500 Plus, but the public disagreed. They didn't see it was worth the extra money for the small enhancements that it offered. In the same year, they released the Amiga 1200. This was the wedge shape again, but a massive improvement on the previous models, and arguably one of their most successful. It came with 2 meg of chip RAM as standard, a 68040 CPU, and it was the first model to offer the AGA chipset. It ran at 25 MHz and it could display 256 colours simultaneously on the screen without using any tricks to do it. Around the back, and this one has a card in it for VGA. And on this side we have got our floppy disk drive, and that's it. This computer is twice as fast as the A500 and it could display up to 16.8 million colours. This one came with both Kickstart 3 and Workbench 3 as well. Even though it comes in the wedge shape, it is remarkably expandable. Over here we have the PCM CIA slot and have an adapter for that, and then you can simply use these SD cards to transfer information or store information backwards and forwards on it. This is the workhorse in the Commodore Cave, and 1992 was a big year for Commodore and the Amiga users with the release of their third model, the 4000. This computer for the first time came with a 1.44 floppy disk drive. Mine has a CD-ROM in it as well. The side simply has the mouse and joystick port, and this is the rear of it. This one has a VGA card installed in it, also an Ethernet card and USB, and then the standard plugs. It was the first computer with the all-singing, all-dancing AGA chipset, came with 2 megabytes of chip RAM, and had anywhere between 4 and 16 megabytes of fast RAM available. Although with the aftermarket cards that could be inserted in it, that could easily be brought up to 256 megabytes. By 1993, Commodore were in serious financial difficulties and they pinned their last best hope on the Amiga CD32, targeting the games console market. This is basically an Amiga 1200 stripped down and put into a console case. It also doubled as a music CD player, which were becoming very popular at that time. This was touted as the world's first 32-bit console, which actually isn't correct. That honour went to FN Towns Marty in Japan about 6 months earlier. It came with a single-speed CD-ROM. There is no button to open it. You just lift it up and take the discs in and out. On the front we have a reset button, a couple of LED indicators, volume slide control, and a headphone jack. So obviously the designers were parents. If we have a look on the side, we've got an auxiliary port and 2 joystick ports. And on the back we have our toggle power switch, power in, TV, S-Video and RCA. There's one more interesting feature, and that's the expansion port. So we can open that up and we can see we've got an edge connector there. Well, what would you put on that? How about one of these, the SX1? This is an expansion cartridge which basically will turn this machine into a full-blown Amiga 1200. All the stuff they left out, you can put it back in again. Has our RGB on this side, and over here we have the ports for a floppy drive, serial, standard AT keyboard, and audio out. And that's where it plugs in. And that plugs in the back, which gives us a rather massive footprint. Don't know why you wouldn't go with just a straight 1200, which is exactly what the public thought. This was basically a stripped down Amiga 1200 running a Motorola 68020 CPU at 14.32 MHz. It had 2 meg of chip RAM available and Kickstart 3.1. And it was targeted squarely at the games console market. I'll switch it on. And we're met with a rather grand startup screen. All it needs now is a CD.
Please, don't worry. Whatever you say. Yes, ma'am. Aye, sir. Okie dokie. I'll take care of him like he was my own brother, or my own sister, or my brother's sister, or my second cousin who was twice removed.
Thousands of these machines were manufactured and ready for shipment to the US for an early 1994 release. That never happened. Commodore had failed to meet a $10 million royalty payment, and that tied them up in the courts, preventing the sale of this on mainland USA. Now, Commodore Cave is not a museum for computers. I'm proud of the fact that I use every one of my computers regularly, except this one. This one is a time capsule. Around 2012, I became aware of a rumour that a number of pellets of new old stock Amiga 1200 Magic packs had been located, abandoned in a storehouse in India. I looked into it and contacted Petrochenko in Germany, and pretty soon I had ordered one. And this is it here. Scala, paperwork, mousepad. Obviously it didn't come like this. I've added a lot of extra material to it. That's the original Amiga startup system discs. And there is the new old stock Amiga. We'll have a quick look around that. It's in new condition, of course, because it is new. And on the back, he's signed the expansion pad. Inside here, I've added a lot of extra accessories. The Amiga operating system, an SD card reader, floppy disk cleaner, Ethernet card, all sorts of good odds and ends that may be required in the future, and even a new joystick. I've actually turned this computer on a couple of times to make sure it's working okay. I've added a real hard disk drive, an accelerator, extra memory, but apart from that, it's new. I will power it up from time to time just to make sure everything's going okay, but I have no intention of using it as a day-to-day machine unless my other 1200 workhorse dies. Well, that's it for me today from the Commodore Cave. I hope you found it interesting. If you did, leave me a thumbs up, or better still, leave a comment, or better still, subscribe. On that note, the new subscribers who have joined recently, welcome. If you've seen anything in these videos that you found interesting and you'd like more information on, let me know what it is and I'll look at doing a YouTube on it if there isn't already one in the library. Again, check out the links below. Till next time, see ya. you keeping up with the Commodore? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you.